Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to History for Sleep, the one-stop channel for deep sleep and calm history stories for a better sleep. Tonight, we are drifting into a slow sleep history story of Alexandria. Tonight, we travel back to a city built on the edge of eternity, a place where the sea whispered secrets and scholars listened. Welcome to Alexandria, home of the greatest library the world has ever known. They say that within its marble walls, the wisdom of every civilization was gathered, scrolls from Greece and Babylon, from Egypt and India, each one a voice in humanity's first attempt to understand itself. Imagine the hush of parchment, the faint scent of ink and oil lamps, the steady scratching of a quill as a scribe copies the stars. Outside, waves crash against the harbor. Inside, minds ignite with questions that will shape centuries to come. The night drapes itself over the world, soft and unhurried. The stars above Egypt shimmer like scattered fragments of ancient scrolls, each one holding a whisper from the past. You are standing by the harbor of Alexandria, and the air tastes faintly of salt and smoke. The waves murmur against the stone piers, carrying echoes of voices that have long faded. Philosophers, scholars, dreamers. Their thoughts drift through time, waiting to be heard once more. In this moment, the noise of the modern world dissolves, leaving only the slow rhythm of the sea and the promise of memory. You close your eyes, and as you breathe in, the centuries roll backward. The city awakens again, alive with the glow of torches and the hum of discovery. Alexandria was unlike any other place on earth. It was a city built for brilliance, for knowledge, for vision, for wonder. Founded by Alexander the Great and nurtured by his successors, it became the beating heart of civilization's curiosity. Its streets shimmered with marble dust and ambition, where Greek philosophers and Egyptian priests crossed paths, trading not gold, but ideas. Ships arrived from distant lands, Greece, Persia, India, bringing scrolls, maps, and mysteries of the heavens. Somewhere beyond the din of the marketplace stood a building so grand it seemed a dream, the Library of Alexandria. Its walls rose like a temple to the human mind, each archway guarding the endless hunger to understand. You approach it slowly now, your footsteps echoing against the cool stone. The lamps flicker low, and the scent of papyrus and cedar oil fills the air. The great doors of the library stand before you, tall, silent, patient. As they creak open, the world outside fades to nothing. Inside, time moves differently. The air feels alive, as though every breath carries the memory of 1,000 voices. You step into a vast hall lined with towering shelves, scrolls resting like sleeping souls, their words waiting to awaken. Every sound is hushed here, every movement measured. The faint scratch of a scribe's quill, the rustle of parchment, the whisper of sandals brushing marble. Together, they form a gentle music of thought. Within these walls, the greatest minds of the ancient world once gathered. Imagine a philosopher bent over his desk, tracing the movements of the stars. A mathematician murmuring quietly to herself as she shapes a new formula. A physician cataloging remedies brought from lands so far they might as well be myth. The library was a living organism, breathing knowledge, growing endlessly. It held not just science and philosophy, but poetry, myth, and stories written by nameless dreamers. Some scrolls were translations, others were originals, and many were fragments, pieced together like mosaics of forgotten civilizations. The people here lived not for fame, but for understanding. Their reward was discovery itself. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it, the soft rustling of countless pages, the heartbeat of history itself. The library's scholars believed that to know the world was to honor it. They mapped the stars not for conquest, but for wonder. They studied language to bridge the gaps between cultures, to make the distant familiar. Even in silence, their devotion hums through the air. The lamps cast a honeyed glow across the wooden tables, and shadows dance over the scrolls, as if the knowledge itself is alive. Somewhere, a scholar yawns. Another hums softly while copying a verse. The night deepens, but here, in the heart of Alexandria, thought never sleeps. The library was not only a collection of knowledge, it was a masterpiece of beauty. Columns of white limestone reached toward the ceiling, supporting domes painted with constellations. Light from oil lamps shimmered against bronze mirrors, guiding readers through their midnight studies. Gardens filled with date palms and fountains offered rest for tired minds. The air carried the mingling scents of ink, flowers, and salt from the nearby sea. To walk through the library was to move through layers of imagination itself. One corridor leading to astronomy, another to medicine, another to poetry written in tongues now lost to the world. Everything felt eternal here, as if the building knew it was guarding something precious, something too vast to belong to a single age. There was a kind of silence in Alexandria that wasn't empty. It was full of thought, full of reverence. The scholars who worked here understood the fragility of knowledge. Every scroll was a bridge across time. Every copied word a small act of defiance against forgetting. They knew that their work would outlive them, that ideas were more enduring than empires. And so, even in the quietest hours, there was purpose in every gesture. When the wind brushed against the stone and stirred the lamps, they saw it not as interruption but as reminder that everything, even air and light, was part of a larger design. This stillness, this patience, was the soul of Alexandria. As the night deepened, even the most tireless minds grew weary. Scholars rested their heads on their desks, scrolls slipping from their hands, dreams mixing with ancient text. Outside, the moon hung low over the harbor, painting silver paths on the sea. The city itself seemed to sleep, ships bobbing softly in the tide, torches fading one by one. But within the library, The quiet persisted, steady as breath. The knowledge stored here did not rest. It waited. For morning, for discovery, for the next curious soul to open a scroll and awaken the past again. Centuries would pass, and much of what you see here would fade into legend. Fires would come, empires would rise and fall, yet the library's spirit would never truly vanish. Its dream lives on in every archive, every classroom, every curious mind that dares to ask why. To stand in its halls, even just in imagination, is to touch the essence of human longing, to know, to remember, to understand. The ashes may have scattered, but the flame of Alexandria burns quietly still in the pages you read, in the questions you whisper before sleep. As you close your eyes now, the sounds of Alexandria fade to a soft hum. The lamps dim, the scribes disappear into shadows, and only the quiet remains, vast, eternal, comforting. You find yourself floating through that silence, weightless among forgotten words. Perhaps, somewhere, a scroll unrolls itself, its ink shimmering faintly, revealing the first lines of a story lost to time. Perhaps it is the story of you, a traveler through ages, guided by curiosity and calm. The night deepens, and with it, your breath slows. The library sleeps again, and so do you, carried gently through the corridors of memory, where knowledge and dreams become one. Long before the library's doors ever opened, a young conqueror stood on the edge of the Nile, staring at the horizon. His name was Alexander the Great, a man who had seen the limits of the known world and dared to imagine what lay beyond. When he founded Alexandria in 331 BCE, he didn't just want a city, he wanted a symbol, a place where East and West could meet, where wisdom from every culture could coexist like stars in a shared sky. He imagined marble streets filled not only with soldiers and merchants, but with thinkers, mathematicians, poets, astronomers, philosophers, all united by curiosity. Though Alexander's life burned bright and brief, his vision outlived him. The city that bore his name would soon grow into something the world had never seen, a home for all knowledge. After Alexander's death, his empire was divided among his generals. Egypt fell to Ptolemy Soter, a man who understood that true power came not only from armies, but from ideas. Ptolemy looked upon the newborn city of Alexandria, its white limestone gleaming beneath the sun, and decided it would become a beacon of learning. He gathered architects, scholars, and scribes from across his realm. The construction began on the Mouseion, a sanctuary dedicated to the Muses, the goddesses of inspiration. This temple would soon expand into the Library of Alexandria, a living monument to the human mind. It was said that its halls could hold hundreds of thousands of scrolls, more knowledge than any single place had ever contained. To Ptolemy, this was more than ambition, it was devotion. The library would be Egypt's soul reborn in ink and parchment. Under Ptolemy and his son, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, the library's collection began to grow. Ships that docked in Alexandria's great harbor were searched for scrolls and manuscripts. Copies were made, originals sometimes kept, and the knowledge of entire civilizations found a new home under Egyptian skies. Greek philosophers debated alongside Persian astrologers. Indian mathematicians shared secrets of numbers and time. Egyptian priests translated hieroglyphs for eager Greek scholars. The library became a crossroads, not of trade, but of truth. Languages mixed, faiths mingled, and the boundaries between worlds began to blur. In an age of conquest and empire, Alexandria dared to create something gentler, something enduring, a piece born of curiosity. The library was part of a greater institution, the Mouseion, or House of the Muses. Here, scholars were not mere librarians, but honored guests, thinkers supported by royal patronage, free to study, write, and teach. They dined together, discussed philosophy in shaded courtyards, and recorded their discoveries on scrolls of papyrus that filled room after room. It was a place of quiet intensity, a university before the idea of a university existed. The Mouseion had gardens, lecture halls, and observatories. In the mornings, you might hear the low murmur of debate. In the evenings, the soft rustle of pages beneath candlelight. Every whisper, every ink mark, every spark of thought added another thread to the vast tapestry of human knowledge. To make sense of so many cultures and tongues, Alexandria became the birthplace of translation. The scholars here believed that wisdom should never be trapped in a single language. Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, Babylonian, Sanskrit, all were welcome, all were woven together. One of the most famous projects was the translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, known as the Septuagint. 72 scholars, it was said, worked separately and yet produced identical translations, a miracle, or perhaps a testament to the shared rhythm of understanding. Through translation, Alexandria gave the ancient world a new voice, one that could be heard across continents. In the glow of its lamps, words became bridges, and the world grew smaller, kinder, and infinitely more connected. Within the library's marble corridors walked some of the greatest minds ever known. Eratosthenes, who measured the earth with astonishing accuracy using only shadows and logic. Euclid, who organized geometry into principles that still guide us today. Herophilus, who dared to study the human body directly, laying the foundation of anatomy. Callimachus, who cataloged the scrolls and created one of the world's first library systems. Each of them left behind not riches or monuments, but questions that would echo through time, shaping science, art, and philosophy for centuries. To walk those halls was to be surrounded by brilliance, and yet by humility too. For the scholars of Alexandria knew that knowledge was endless, and the more they learned, the more they realized how much remained unknown. Imagine the library at dawn. The first light filters through the tall columns, painting gold over the stone floors. Scribes arrive early, their fingers stained with ink, ready to copy texts carried from distant lands. A teacher gathers his students in the garden to discuss Plato, while across the courtyard, a physician examines herbs brought from Nubia. The smell of papyrus and sea breeze drifts through the halls. Scrolls whisper softly as they are unrolled, the faint sound like waves lapping on a shore. Knowledge here feels alive, as if it breathes and waits patiently to be understood. There are no kings or peasants here, no barriers of birth or class. Only minds, open and searching. The library's purpose was not merely to collect, but to inspire. Its scholars believed that truth was not a destination, but a journey, a slow unfolding, like dawn over the sea. They sought to understand the movements of stars, the nature of numbers, the mysteries of the soul. They argued, disagreed, and wrote tirelessly, knowing that their efforts might never be complete. But they continued, for curiosity itself was sacred. In their quiet devotion, they built something far greater than any empire, a civilization of thought. To learn was to live, to question was to be free, and to share knowledge was the purest act of love. As centuries passed, Alexandria became the crown jewel of the ancient world. Poets called it the light of the earth. Merchants came to trade not just goods, but ideas. The harbor bustled with ships from every coast, each carrying scrolls as precious as treasure. At night, the great lighthouse of Pharos, one of the seven wonders, guided travelers home, its flame mirroring the light of learning that burned within the library's walls. The two stood as twin symbols of hope, one guiding sailors through darkness, the other guiding minds through ignorance. Together, they made Alexandria not just a city, but a dream. But even dreams have shadows. In the glow of its greatness, few imagined that the library could ever fall. Yet every flame, no matter how bright, flickers in the wind. Empires change. Wars arrive uninvited. Time, relentless and patient, begins its quiet erosion. Still, in this moment, before the smoke, before the loss, Alexandria stands untouched. The sea sighs against its walls, the scholars murmur beneath the stars, and knowledge hums softly in the air like a lullaby. It is the sound of humanity at its most beautiful, the sound of wonder itself. Within the silent corridors of the Library of Alexandria, the guardians of wisdom worked not with swords or shields, but with ink and patience. They were the scribes, scholars, philosophers, and dreamers who dedicated their lives to preserving the world's knowledge. By day, they bent over long wooden desks, copying faded letters with precision and care. By night, they sat beneath oil lamps, debating ideas that would outlive them all. Their tools were humble: papyrus, quills, wax tablets. Yet through them, they held the power to shape eternity. To them, each word was sacred, each scroll a living soul. And though they walked softly through the marble halls, Their presence filled the air like quiet thunder, a storm of thought and devotion. The scribes were the heartbeat of the library. Many had traveled from distant lands, fluent in languages long forgotten by others. Their task was simple in purpose but divine in meaning: to copy, to preserve, to protect. You could hear them at dawn, the soft crackle of papyrus, the whisper of styluses gliding across the page. Each movement was a prayer against the forgetfulness of time. They worked slowly, reverently, because they knew that one slip of ink could alter meaning for generations. When they completed a text, they would roll it carefully, tie it with linen string, and mark it with wax. These were not just scrolls, they were vessels of immortality. The scribes knew that words could survive even when empires could not. In another wing of the library, philosophers gathered beneath open colonnades, where the air smelled faintly of sea and stone. Among them, you might find a young thinker staring into the distance, wrestling with a single question that could change everything. Here, debate was not about victory, it was about discovery. Voices were calm, measured, thoughtful. One spoke of the soul, another of the stars, another of the invisible threads that connect all living things. Between their words hung a silence so deep it felt sacred, as if the universe itself paused to listen. They called it logos, the logic that bound creation together. And in their quiet search, they found not just knowledge, but peace, the kind that comes when the mind finally looks inward and recognizes itself in the vastness of all things. Every civilization feared being forgotten. The scholars of Alexandria understood this fear intimately. They called themselves keepers of memory, for they saw how fragile human legacy could be. They collected stories of distant kings, herbal remedies from forgotten tribes, hymns sung to gods whose names no one spoke anymore. To preserve these fragments was to defy death itself. Each document they copied was a whisper from the past rescued from silence. Some scholars wrote in secret languages, creating coded systems of reference to protect their work from misuse. Others dedicated entire lifetimes to a single subject: astronomy, medicine, or poetry. Together, they formed a web of remembrance, a network of minds determined to keep humanity from ever truly vanishing. Among the scholars, there was a shared belief that truth was not owned by any one culture or god, but by the world itself. They studied not to prove superiority, but to understand harmony. Greek logic, Egyptian mysticism, Indian mathematics, Babylonian astronomy, all were seen as pieces of a single cosmic puzzle. The library became a mirror of the universe, each scroll a reflection of one small part of it. In this pursuit, the scholars transcended their time. They saw that light could be measured, that the earth curved beneath the stars, that numbers could describe not just trade but the patterns of life itself. And in every question they asked, there was humility, a gentle acknowledgement that the more they knew, the more there was to know. To walk through the library at its height was to hear the music of knowledge, a harmony made not of instruments, but of minds at work. The faint murmur of voices reciting verses, the rhythmic tapping of quills, the flutter of scrolls being unrolled and examined. Somewhere, a mathematician scribbled lines in the dust. Nearby, a poet whispered to himself, testing the melody of his words. Even the sound of sandals on stone seemed part of the symphony. The library was alive, not loud, not restless, but deeply awake. In its stillness, creation unfolded quietly, like ripples spreading across water. And those centuries would pass, that music would never fully stop. Even now, in the quiet of your own room, you can almost hear it, soft, steady, eternal. The library thrived on mentorship, the passing of wisdom from one voice to another. A young student might arrive trembling, clutching his first scroll, afraid to speak. His teacher, perhaps a philosopher worn by years of study, would guide him gently, not through answers, but through questions. "Do not memorize," he would say softly. "Understand." Lessons took place in courtyards bathed in sunlight, or under the flicker of oil lamps when night fell. Learning was slow, deliberate, unhurried. Students learned not only how to think, but how to wonder. In those moments, knowledge was not a task, but a communion, one mind lighting another, like candles in a sacred hall. Though history often forgets their names, women too walked these halls. Among them was Hypatia of Alexandria, a philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer who lived centuries after the library's founding. She became a symbol of what it meant to seek truth in a world often afraid of it. Hypatia taught her students to love logic and to see beauty in reason. She wrote of the stars, the nature of numbers, and the grace of geometry. In a world dominated by men, she shone like a solitary flame, unbending, luminous, and kind. Her presence reminded all who studied there that wisdom has no gender, no boundaries, no owners. It belongs to those brave enough to search for it. For all their brilliance, the scholars also carried a quiet sorrow. They knew that what they learned could be lost. Papyrus crumbles, ink fades, empires fall. They lived with the awareness that time would one day turn their labors to dust. Yet they worked on, not for fame, but for faith. Faith that somewhere, someone would rediscover their words, that ideas might one day return like seeds carried on the wind. This awareness gave their work a kind of sacred melancholy, a beauty found in impermanence. To study, to record, to preserve, was to whisper into eternity, even knowing eternity might never answer. And so the guardians of wisdom remained, quiet, tireless, eternal in spirit. They watched as generations came and went, as kings rose and crumbled, as scrolls multiplied like dreams. They were witnesses to the birth of understanding and the fragility of memory. Even when the fires came, when the shelves turned to ash and smoke swallowed the air, the idea they served did not die. Knowledge, once awakened, can never truly be destroyed. It changes form, hides in hearts, drifts through centuries. Tonight, as you listen and drift towards sleep, imagine them still there, their ink-stained fingers, their gentle eyes, their calm persistence. The guardians of wisdom, watching over us still, reminding us that every question, every dream, every quiet act of curiosity is a spark in the eternal library of the human soul. Breathe softly and picture a room filled with a golden hush. The air carries a faint, sweet fragrance, the scent of papyrus, warmed by the sun and dusted by time. These were the lungs of Alexandria's library, thousands upon thousands of scrolls resting in the dim glow of oil lamps. Their surfaces were not just ink and fiber, but the heartbeat of entire civilizations. Every scroll held the memory of a people, the thoughts of a thinker, the rhythm of an ancient world trying to make sense of itself. You can almost hear it, the faint crackle as a scholar unrolls a papyrus sheet, whispering to himself as he reads lines written by someone who may have lived 1,000 years before him. Each word, a fragile thread between past and present, spun across generations and seas. The scrolls were not silent, not truly. They murmured softly through the hands that touched them, carrying voices that refused to be forgotten. The Library of Alexandria was unlike any other place on Earth. It did not simply collect books, it gathered worlds. The rulers of Egypt, the Ptolemies, sent their agents far and wide, to Athens and Babylon, to Persia, India, and beyond, seeking the wisdom of every known land. Ships docking in the harbor were gently searched, their scrolls borrowed and copied before being returned. Each fragment of knowledge, whether myth or map, was deemed precious. In these scrolls lay the mathematics of the Greeks, the star charts of Babylonian astronomers, the medicinal recipes of Egyptian healers, and the sacred hymns of faraway lands. Imagine the scholars, their robes brushing against marble floors, as they carried armfuls of papyrus to and from the scriptorium. They spoke in hushed tones, translating, interpreting, preserving. The library was not merely a building. It was a living, breathing organism, a body made of words, veins filled with ink, and a soul built from curiosity. Papyrus itself was a wonder of creation. Grown along the banks of the Nile, this reed was sliced, pressed, and dried under the heat of the Egyptian sun until it became a smooth, pale surface, strong yet delicate. Upon it, the ink of history flowed. The scribes worked patiently, dipping their brushes into soot-black pigment, writing in flowing lines that curved like the river itself. Each character, each mark, was a small act of devotion to knowledge. The papyrus sheets were then rolled tightly, tied with linen cords, and labeled with small wooden tags inscribed in Greek or Demotic script. In the quiet storage rooms of the library, shelves stretched endlessly, stacked with thousands of these curled treasures. Each roll was a sleeping mind waiting to awaken again, a dream caught in fibers and resin. To hold one was to hold a moment of human wonder, To unroll one was to step into the thoughts of another soul, perhaps long vanished, yet still whispering across time. Within those scrolls were stories beyond imagination. There were the plays of Sophocles, the poetry of Sappho, and the philosophies of Plato. But alongside them rested fragments of the unknown, tales from Indian sages, astronomical treatises from the Persians, and hieroglyphic hymns from priests of R.A. Alexandria. Scholars sought not only to preserve, but to understand, to weave these different threads into a single fabric of universal knowledge. Imagine a linguist hunched beneath the lamplight, translating a Babylonian omen tablet into Greek. Nearby, another compares the herbs mentioned in Egyptian medical papyri to the remedies of Hippocrates. The library was not a museum of the past. It was a dialogue, a conversation that spanned continents and centuries. Each scroll was a voice added to a grand chorus of human thought. Together, they sang a quiet song of unity, that all knowledge, no matter its origin, shared one purpose: to help humankind see beyond the horizon of ignorance. And yet, for all its brilliance, the library's greatest treasure was also its greatest weakness: fragility. Papyrus, though enduring, feared fire, moisture, and neglect. A single spark, a single careless hand, could erase a lifetime's worth of knowledge. Scholars treated each scroll with reverence, yet they knew how temporary it all was. Perhaps that awareness made their work sacred. They labored not for immortality but against oblivion, copying texts again and again, hoping that somewhere, someone would preserve their echo. In the still air of the library, surrounded by shelves of quiet dreams, they worked with a kind of faith that knowledge could outlive destruction, that thought could survive beyond flesh. Every copied scroll was an act of hope, every translation a prayer. Even now, as we think of those lost papyri turned to dust long ago, we can feel that same hope, that the quest for understanding never truly ends. When the library's scrolls burned, whether by accident, conquest, or time, much of that ancient wisdom vanished forever. Yet some survived, carried by travelers, quoted by philosophers, preserved in distant copies that found their way into monasteries and archives centuries later. The legacy of Alexandria did not end in ash. It scattered like glowing embers across the world. Every library that stands today, every collection of books, every archive of learning, is a descendant of that dream. The papyrus scrolls may have turned to smoke, but their spirit lingers in every written word, every scholar's quiet curiosity. When you read or listen to stories like this, you are, in a way, walking again through the silent halls of Alexandria, feeling the same air, hearing the same whispers of parchment. The library may have fallen, but its song remains, soft, endless, and unbroken, drifting through the centuries, waiting for you to hear it once more. The night was heavy with silence when the flames came. Imagine the city of Alexandria beneath a deep violet sky, the scent of salt and smoke mingling in the harbor air. Somewhere, far beyond the palace walls, a spark was struck, an ember that would swallow centuries. The great library, that sanctuary of words and wonder, stood quietly as fire began to dance along the scrolls. The oil lamps, once gentle companions to scholars, now fed a roaring blaze that devoured the past. The papyrus that once whispered wisdom now curled into blackened ghosts. The scholars, frozen by disbelief, could only watch as their life's purpose, the preservation of knowledge, turned to drifting ash. In the fire's reflection, they saw the fading of a dream. No sound but the crackle of parchment, the sigh of wood, and the quiet shattering of humanity's memory. For as the flames rose, so too did the understanding that something irreplaceable was being lost. Not just knowledge, but the heart of curiosity itself. And yet, even as we tell this story, truth slips through our fingers like sand. For no one truly knows when the fire began, or even if it was one fire at all. Some say the destruction came when Julius Caesar fought in Alexandria in 48 BCE, his ships aflame and the harbor consumed. The flames, they claim, spread inland, licking at the scrolls stored near the docks. Others believe it happened later, centuries later, when Christian zealots, seeing the old pagan texts as heresy, sought to cleanse the city of ancient gods and their teachings. Still others whisper of the Muslim conquest and the story, perhaps apocryphal, of Caliph Omar ordering the remaining scrolls burned, declaring that if their contents agreed with the Quran they were unnecessary, and if they did not, they were dangerous. The truth is veiled, lost like the very scrolls it describes. What remains is a legend, of knowledge consumed not by time alone, but by the flaws and fears of humankind. Perhaps the library did not burn in one great inferno, but slowly, painfully, over generations. Each ruler, each war, each neglectful century took a piece of it away. A leak in the roof, a war in the streets, a careless soldier. The scrolls may have been moved, scattered, forgotten, before they were finally destroyed. And in this way, the library's death mirrors that of memory itself, not sudden, but gradual, a dimming of light rather than an explosion of flame. Time can burn as fiercely as fire. It eats paper and silence. It devours names and faces. The marble floors cracked, the shelves rotted, and the scholars' voices grew faint. When the final door closed, when dust settled where once ideas had lived, the world may not even have noticed that it had grown dimmer. And yet, even then, some sparks endured, small embers hidden in the writings of travelers, the notes of later philosophers, and the myths told by those who still believed in the sacredness of knowledge. It is said that the library once held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, perhaps 500,000, though no one knows for certain. Within them were the lost plays of Aeschylus, the complete works of Sappho, the histories of entire civilizations erased from record. There were mathematical treatises that may have advanced science by centuries, maps of forgotten continents, and early theories of the universe that might have changed the course of human thought. But perhaps what was lost was more than information. It was a worldview, a belief that knowledge, in all its forms, was sacred, that every idea deserved a place, every voice a hearing. When the flames consumed the library, they did not just destroy words. They burned a bridge between past and future. What remained was silence and the slow rebuilding of wisdom from fragments. Even now, every lost scroll haunts our curiosity like a ghost, whispering what might have been had we been able to hear its story. The destruction of the library became more than a tragedy. It became a symbol. Artists, poets, and historians have retold the story for centuries, each generation reshaping it to reflect its own fears and desires. To the Renaissance thinker, it was a warning against ignorance. To the Enlightenment philosopher, a cry for preservation. To modern minds, it stands as a monument to the fragility of human achievement. And so the story has grown, layered with myth and meaning. Some imagine Caesar's soldiers throwing torches into the stacks. Others envision monks weeping as they carry away the last unburnt scrolls. The truth may lie somewhere quieter, more mundane, a slow decay, unnoticed until too late. But the myth remains powerful because it reminds us of what it means to care, to preserve, to protect ideas from the ruin of time. The library may be gone, but its loss continues to teach that memory, once lost, can never be truly restored. Yet perhaps, in a gentler sense, the Library of Alexandria never truly died. Its spirit endures in every archive, every classroom, every human heart that longs to understand. The same hunger for knowledge that filled those ancient halls still burns quietly within us. We, too, collect, preserve, and share. We, too, fear the loss of truth. When you close your eyes tonight and think of those flames, imagine instead that the fire was not destruction, but transformation, the light passing from parchment to mind, from scholar to dreamer, from Alexandria to you. The ashes of that library settled across the centuries, nourishing the soil of thought from which new ideas would grow. And so, even in loss, the library became eternal, a symbol of our endless quest to remember, to rebuild, and to know. In the hush of the ancient ruins, long after the fires faded, there lingers a whisper, a rumor of lost machines, of wonders that once filled the halls of Alexandria. The library, it is said, was not only a sanctuary of scrolls, but also a workshop of minds. Here, invention was not bound by practicality, but guided by curiosity. The scholars of Alexandria sought to understand the nature of reality itself, the workings of the heavens, the secrets of motion, the rhythm of time. Imagine standing in one of those long, cool corridors, the air filled with the scent of oils and parchment, and hearing the faint ticking of some delicate mechanism turning in the shadows. Was it a clock? A celestial model? A device that measured the movement of the stars? The library was more than memory. It was motion, a place where thought became creation. And though the walls have fallen and the inventions turned to dust, the spirit of innovation that once lived here continues to hum softly through the centuries, reminding us that knowledge is never truly still. Among the whispers of Alexandria's genius, one name drifts through the mist: Hero of Alexandria. A thinker, an engineer, and perhaps one of the earliest magicians of science. He lived after the library's golden age, yet his work carried its echo. From the heart of that intellectual legacy came devices that would seem like magic to those of his time. The Eolipile, a simple sphere that spun when heated by steam, the first recorded steam engine, hummed quietly in his workshop. It was a toy, perhaps, or a temple trick, but within its whirling motion lay the seed of the industrial age, born 2,000 years too soon. Hero also designed automatic doors that opened by fire's heat, fountains that defied gravity, and even mechanical birds that sang. Each invention was a dream given form, a glimpse of what humanity could achieve when imagination and knowledge danced together. In the candlelight, as steam hissed and bronze gleamed, one could almost believe that the library itself was breathing again, through gears and flame, through the mind of a single dreamer. But Hero was not alone in his wonder. There were others, nameless thinkers whose ideas are known only through faint traces scattered across surviving fragments. Some spoke of intricate devices that tracked the stars, early auras, spinning models of the cosmos, built to mirror the heavens. Others whispered of automatic water clocks, complex enough to measure hours with exquisite precision. In the Museum of Alexandria, the sister institution to the library, scholars may have built contraptions powered by falling water, pulleys, and air pressure, the ancestors of the machines that would one day reshape civilization. To the ancients, these creations were not merely tools, they were acts of reverence. To imitate nature was to honor the gods who made it. And so, each invention was both a prayer and an experiment, a delicate balance between the spiritual and the scientific. Even now, when we look upon the fragments of bronze and glass left behind, it is easy to imagine their creators working by lamplight, surrounded by the quiet hum of ideas taking shape in metal and motion. Many historians believe that the destruction of the library did not just erase knowledge, it erased potential futures. Imagine if Hero's steam engine had been developed further, if his principles had been refined and shared. The Industrial Revolution might have begun in the ancient world centuries before its time. The scrolls of Alexandria may have contained designs for lenses, for mechanisms, for tools that could have accelerated human progress in ways we can only dream of. Some legends even claim the library held the secrets of Archimedes' war machines, mirrors that could set ships aflame, devices that lifted heavy stones with ease, or pumps that drained harbors. These tales may blur fact and myth, yet their persistence reveals something deeper, a longing for what might have been, The ruins of Alexandria remind us that innovation is not a straight line, but a fragile thread. When broken, it takes centuries to weave again. Somewhere in the ashes of those lost scrolls, the world's future lay waiting, a future that never came to be. Within the silent halls, another kind of experiment unfolded, one not of machines, but of mystery. The alchemists of Alexandria believed that nature itself could be persuaded to change, that metals could become gold, that matter could transform into light. To them, invention was not separate from spirituality. It was the language of creation. Their laboratories, filled with glass vessels and bubbling mixtures, were both scientific and sacred. They recorded their observations carefully, the first sparks of what would become chemistry, but their scrolls, too, were consumed by time. Still, the dream of transformation endured. It became the heartbeat of later scholars, who sought to turn mystery into method, faith into formula. And in this way, the library's legacy continued, flowing like quicksilver through the ages. Even now, when we mix chemicals in a laboratory, when we search for the essence of matter or the origin of the stars, we are speaking in the old tongue of Alexandria, the language of wonder, whispered softly in glass and flame. As the centuries passed, the ruins of the library faded into legend, but the idea of it, the dream of invention, of curiosity unbound, refused to die. Every modern machine, every spark of discovery, carries a trace of that ancient spirit. The engineers of today are, in a way, the heirs of Alexandria, their blueprints and algorithms the new papyrus scrolls. The computers that hum softly through the night, the telescopes that gaze into infinity, the engines that drive ships and stars alike. All of them are echoes of the dreams once whispered in those halls. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you can still hear it. The gentle ticking of an invisible clock, the quiet turn of an ancient gear, the soft murmur of an inventor lost in thought. The ruins of Alexandria may be silent, but their silence is not emptiness. It is potential, infinite, waiting, eternal. The sea that once washed Alexandria burn still moves with the same rhythm. Waves rise and fall, indifferent to the centuries that have passed. But along the same shore, where marble once gleamed and scrolls once whispered, something new has risen, a structure of glass and stone, curved like the rising sun. This is the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a modern echo of an ancient dream. Its walls are engraved with letters from every known alphabet, symbols from every tongue, a promise that the world's knowledge belongs to all. When the morning light touches its facade, it seems to shimmer like memory itself, as if the spirit of the old library has found a new home. Inside, books line the shelves once more. The air hums with quiet reverence, the way it might have 2,000 years ago. And as visitors walk through its halls, they are reminded that even after fire, after silence, after loss, humanity rebuilds. The hunger to know, to preserve, to understand, it endures. Always. The new Library of Alexandria is not merely an Egyptian monument. It is a global offering. Built beside the sea in 2002, it was shaped as a disk tilted toward the horizon, a symbol of the sun's eternal rising, of knowledge reborn. Within its curved walls are millions of volumes, digital archives, research centers, and museums. Scientists, artists, and thinkers gather there from every nation, just as they did long ago. The hum of computers replaces the scratch of quills. The glow of screens replaces the flicker of lamps. But the essence remains the same, a gathering of minds. Here, the languages of the world mingle in quiet unity. Arabic, English, French, Greek, all coexist, as if the old scholars of Alexandria have returned in spirit, speaking now through technology and collaboration. To walk through its corridors is to walk through time, to feel the weight of what was lost and the joy of what has been rediscovered. The library stands not as a replica, but as a rebirth. Though no scrolls from the ancient library survive, its memory breathes through the architecture of the new. Beneath the Bibliotheca lies a museum honoring Egypt's long heritage of knowledge, from hieroglyphs carved in stone to manuscripts written on delicate papyrus. The design itself reflects continuity. The circular roof represents the passage of the sun, the eternal cycle of loss and renewal. Even the light that enters through its high windows is deliberate, soft, filtered, like the glow of dawn over the Nile. Here, technology merges with history. Digital archives preserve fragile manuscripts that time once threatened to erase. Satellites connect scholars across continents. The fragility that once doomed the old library has been transformed into resilience. Data stored in cloud and code, preserved beyond the reach of fire. Yet still, as you walk its halls, there is a silence, a sacred hush that feels like reverence. The same silence the ancient scribes must have felt, knowing they were surrounded by the sum of human thought. The Library of Alexandria was never just Egypt's treasure, it was humanity's. And so its legacy now stretches far beyond the Mediterranean. Every great library in the world, from the British Library in London to the Library of Congress in Washington, carries its spirit. They are all descendants of that first dream, that knowledge could unite rather than divide. In these modern halls, ideas from all nations sit side by side. Ancient scripts rest beside modern code. Philosophy meets physics, poetry meets programming. It is as if the lost scrolls of Alexandria have been reborn in fragments, scattered like stars across the earth. The fire that once consumed the past has, in a strange way, illuminated the present. Because of that loss, humanity learned to protect its memory better, to preserve, to digitize, to share. The tragedy of Alexandria became the seed of global wisdom. Its destruction became its gift. A reminder that knowledge, like light, grows stronger the more it is shared. But perhaps the truest rebuilding of Alexandria did not happen in glass or stone. It happened in us, Each person who reads, who studies, who dreams, carries a fragment of that library in their heart. Every book you open, every idea you chase, every question that keeps you awake at night, these are the same sparks that once flickered in those marble halls. The ancient scholars believed knowledge was sacred because it connected us to eternity, to the gods, to the cosmos, to each other. And though the building fell, that belief never did. It lives in teachers, scientists, writers, and thinkers. It lives in every conversation that seeks to understand rather than to judge. It lives in curiosity, that small, luminous flame that even fire cannot destroy. When you pause to wonder about the stars, or the past, or the future, you are standing again in the Library of Alexandria, not as a visitor, but as one of its keepers. In the quiet of the modern library, if you listen closely, you might still hear it. The rustle of parchment, the low hum of voices long gone. The sea outside still carries its eternal rhythm, washing against the same stones where the ancients once stood. The world has changed beyond their imagining, and yet, in the heart of knowledge, nothing has truly changed. The questions remain the same. Who are we? Why are we here? What do we seek to understand? The Library of Alexandria was humanity's first great answer to those questions, an attempt to capture truth in ink and time. And its modern rebirth, in all its digital glory, is another answer, that we never stop searching. The fire may have taken the scrolls, but it could not take the yearning behind them. That yearning glows still in classrooms and computers, in dreams and discoveries. It is the light that guides us, fragile, infinite, unending. And now, as you drift toward sleep, imagine standing before the sea once more. The waves shimmer with reflected starlight. The new library stands at your back, radiant and calm, its windows glowing like gentle eyes watching over the night. In the silence, you can almost hear the whispers of the old scholars, faint, distant, grateful. They are not mourning what was lost, but marveling at what was reborn. For the Library of Alexandria was never just a building. It was a dream, and dreams, unlike stone, cannot burn. They linger, carried by minds that dare to remember. So breathe slowly, and let the tide of time carry you. The fire is gone. The ash has settled. What remains is peace, and the quiet promise that knowledge, once kindled, will forever find its way back to the light. Tonight, as you drift to sleep, imagine the library still standing, columns bathed in moonlight, shelves alive with stories. Somewhere, a scholar still writes by candlelight, preserving not just knowledge, but the hope that one day, all that was lost will be found again. So breathe, rest, and let your mind wander through the quiet ruins of Alexandria, where dreams of wisdom once burned bright, and where, perhaps, they still do.